Hello, everybody. So I know I literally say this every time, but this time I'm not just stoked. I have actually been waiting for months for this interview. I'm so excited because who I have here with me today is Tania Hogan, who is I was going to say the newest addition to the Anansi team, but that's actually not true. We recently welcomed a new strategist, but you have been with us for only a spare 4 or 5 months, and they have just been amazing. You have rocked our world, Tania, and I'm so excited to welcome you to the show. Thanks for being here.
Oh, thanks, A. That's I feel like I'm the lucky one, to be honest, that you guys hired me, and I was just so excited when I saw the job posting and then going through the process and getting to know Anansi and the team, and most importantly, the clients that you guys work with. And I've just been establishing all of those like establishing relationships with amazing people. And I can't believe that every day, and I think you said this the best the one time, is I get to talk to interesting people every single day. Like, that's what I get paid to do. Who wouldn't want that? So thank you.
Awesome. I'm so glad you feel that way. Yes, I often say and have said in the past that working at Anansi is like hanging out with the coolest people in the world all day.
It's true.
Both the people on the team and all of the people that we work with, our partners and clients and stuff. Oh, it's amazing. So Before I rant too much about how wonderful you are and your superpowers are, in your own words, I would love to hear, Tania, what is your superpower?
I feel like my superpower is connecting authentically with people. And I know a lot of people kind of say those kinds of things, but for me, I get a kick. Like I said, like I get to meet and talk to interesting people every day, but for me, it's about hearing people's stories and getting to know their stories, because that's where we can truly connect as people. And you can start to see where there might be an opportunity where we can work together, or, hey, our products or our services could really help you, or you've got some really interesting things that are going on. I'd love to introduce you to so-and-so. So that's my superpower.
Awesome. And I'm so excited that you brought up the idea of story, because obviously all of us at Anansi are all about story. We tell stories every day. And it's just really, really cool that as someone who is in the account management seat, so, you're not literally writing those stories the way our strategists are, or dreaming up those stories the way the marketing people are, but stories are still what drives you. I just think that's super, super cool. Okay, so why does the world need this? Why does the world need what you do, both your superpower and however else you want to define that?
Well, I think especially now, being in the middle of this pandemic, and, as we're going into level 48 of the Jumanji game, I think what we need right now is everybody is very open, because we're all in the same boat. We're all dealing with the issues that are surrounding this. So for right now, I think it's more important than ever that you are just having those open conversations with people, because you just never know where it's going to lead.
Yeah. If there's one thing that has kind of come to me during this pandemic, which just keeps going on and on and on, is that the more differences we have, the more we are the same. And even at the same time, as there has been a lot of kind of polarizing events in the world lately in terms of how countries or areas or communities are handling all of the issues that are being brought up by this situation, it's also shown me how much empathy I can have for other people, and vice versa, who are being thrust into the online world or into the world of isolation or into the world of, just dealing with stress and things outside of your control.
Yeah, I find with this, one of the key things that I really liked and that I saw right off the bat, where all of the people, like especially within the digital community, how many people just started up those Facebook groups, and they all came together to help one another out. Like, hey, my services, and this is even with one of our clients, our services could really help you out. I'm going to give you 5 hours consulting time for free to help you adjust and to move to more onto the online world. Like, I just liked how people came together. Like, in these moments, you can either be an early adopter, or you could kind of fold in, take some time to reflect, and then come at it at a later time. But yeah, I loved where people just like jumped in and took action.
Yeah, yeah. I've been very blessed here. And I do want to acknowledge this hasn't been the same for everybody, depending what area
Right.
you're in. But in the community that I'm in, people have really, really banded together. I was joking at the beginning. Now this is extended. I don't know if I can say this anymore, but I was like, this wasn't the apocalypse that we were expecting, but it's kind of the apocalypse that we didn't know we need.
That's true. No, very true.
Yeah. Where in my community, this has actually been pushing a lot of different areas of social change basically forward much faster than they might have otherwise, which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
Anyway, we're bringing it back to you
Yes.
and your story. So I would love, I've heard quite a bit about kind of your history and what's brought you here today. But I'm curious, if you could name one kind of critical factor that has contributed to your success in sales and account management, that whole world, what would it be?
The critical factor, I think for me, it was, oh gosh, there's so many like little mini pinpoints that are inside of there. But for me, it was kind of identifying and figuring out, how do I connect with people? And because I genuinely want to help people. I don't want to sell them something. I want to be there to show them that I can help them fix a challenge or identify a new opportunity. So I guess one of the key points in my career was working for a social enterprise. And it was there that I really started to dig in a little bit deeper about understanding, and like now it had an approach. It was the consultative sales approach, rather than just being like, hey, you need to sell X amount and you need to sell 2 units and this, that, and the other. And instead of breaking those numbers down, it was like, oh no, this speaks directly to me. This resonates with me, and it doesn't feel like I'm selling. And from there, working with that social enterprise, I developed the director of sales position, and I took a team of 2 to 7 in the middle of the recession in 2008. And nobody was hiring more salespeople and account managers. In fact, that they were getting rid of it. And we were selling a marketing product that, and again, they were slashing their marketing and everything else. So it was just that, I think that was like one of the key times where I really got to shine. Like everything was resonating with me, the service, the product, and it all just came together really beautifully. I stayed with them for like 3.5 years. So yeah.
Yeah, awesome. That's really cool. And this really just brings me back, to this idea that when we are in challenging times, there's actually some of the biggest opportunities in those times. And I will be fully candid and say that it is because of this situation. We hired you like right at the beginning of COVID, basically. And it's only because of that opportunity that we were even able to get a chance at someone as amazing as you, just because we instead of submitting to fear and being like, oh crap, this is happening, we need to really like batten down our hatches and stuff. Now we did run the data, we're nerds, so we did like run the data and run the numbers and everything, but we were like, you know what, now is actually the time for us to hire. Now is the time for us to lean into this, to trust in ourselves. And it's been working out pretty good for us so far.
Same here.
Yeah. So I'd love to just dig in a little bit deeper to your story, So you talked about this pivotal moment where all of a sudden working for a social enterprise, you went from, okay, I have to just sell stuff to people, and that being the expectation, to really creating relationships and providing value and fixing problems, so to speak, more so. Yeah. Can you share a little bit more, just over the course of your story, what have been some other pivotal points or kind of points of success that have really supported that realization, either before or after?
Yeah, definitely. I think, well, one of the most interesting jobs that I ever did, and I saw this ad online and a job opening, and I kind of laughed when I saw the title of the, like who was hiring, and it was actually a sex shop. So the sex shop was hiring, and I kind of was like, oh my God, okay, like that's funny. But then I started to look at their job description and I was like, wait a second, this job description explains all of my experience. And I applied kind of like on a, not really expecting a phone call.
Whim? Yeah.
Yeah. And just, I was putting a bunch of resumes out. And so this was, I'd been in retail for this time about 10 years at that point.
Okay. And where was this? When was this?
In Toronto, I would say 2005, 2006. Okay. And I went in for the interview and I was super shocked because, and I think they did this on purpose, but there was like a giant sex toy on her desk. And I was like trying to like maintain eye contact with her at the same time. But then I started to relax a little bit because she was very open and it was just a very interesting conversation. And I could see that they were very, I was coming from big box stores and this, like these were very, like small boutiques and family run. And we just got to talking and it just all came together for me. And it was an incredible experience in the fact that like, here I am trying to talk and have intimate conversations with people that I don't even, that I don't know. And it's kind of hush hush but we have a lot of fun with it, And I think that, and by approaching it with that sort of mindset of like, okay, the more fun that we can have with this and the more that we can kind of elevate this and make it classy, like because our parent company was a lingerie company, I looked at the opportunity and I said, well, why aren't we dressing like all these beautiful girls in corsets and dress pants and making it an experience rather than hiding things and like making it seem like this was dirty. I was
something
like, I like
ashamed of. Yeah.
Exactly. It's not supposed to be ashamed of. This is supposed to be fun and naughty and like all of this sort of stuff. So I really enjoyed that job because it allowed me the opportunity to take a look at things a little bit differently in the way that you interact with people, especially with such an intimate conversation, like where somebody walks in the door and you ask them how their Thursday morning's going and they tell you it's great. I just rode a bike over here wearing a butt plug. And I'm like, and I've got no words. What do you even say in that moment? So you're just like, awesome, good for you. How can I help you out today? Like I got everything thrown at me in the 1.5, 2 years that I was working with them, but I had such a great time working with them. I met amazing people and interesting people. And we, you really dig into understanding what is it that clients want, because we were in such different areas. There was 5 or 6 of the shops and they were all very different clientele. So it was selling directly to that clientele and understanding your market.
Okay. So that's really cool. What I'm hearing is that when you initially heard about this position, you too were kind of like drawn in by the stigma and kind of like, oh my gosh, is this something I want to associate myself with? Is this something I want to go into? But once you were there, it sounds like the experience actually gave you empathy for all of the other customers who were coming in, who are probably no more like deviant or weird or perverted than any of us or our average people. Like, let's face it, right? Like sex is a normal human thing. But it's something that's so stigmatized that it sounds like having that experience allowed you to move past the stigma of kind of like the word sex toys, or I guess that's 2 words, and realize that sales is still about the same fundamental principles of interacting human to human, hearing their story, not shaming their story, and really just helping them connect to the thing that's going to resolve their need. And I'm going to put it out there that the fact that there's so much stigma around sex, I know that as a young person myself, and I was just kind of like interested in exploring, kind of interested in new things, going into a sex shop in Vancouver where the values were actually strongly aligned with my values around like positivity and pleasure and authenticity and all this different stuff.
Right.
And going in there and just seeing very, very, very happy, unashamed people. I know that was my experience. That changed me. That like, even though I was just going in there to give somebody money and walk out with something and maybe kind of like giggle a bit, going in there and being like, wow, all of these people are just, they just care. They care about their life. They clearly love their jobs in that situation, right? They clearly love their jobs. They're having fun with it. They're letting me feel like normal and heard and accepted. That actually had a positive experience and a positive impact outside of just kind of what's going on with sex in my brain. It actually had a positive experience just for my psyche. I was like, wow, I'm an okay person. You know?
Yeah, because when you think about it, like what's exactly going back into that, like what's one person's kink is another person's normal. So the more that you can like break that out and break that down and just be like, okay, we're all humans, we're all here, we all know what this is. And the more the fun that we were having with it, the more that people were engaged, the more that they were coming in. Like I would get large groups of bachelorette parties coming in. So I created, from those moments, I'm like, oh, this is interesting. We started to create more shopping events and different ways that we could create client experiences so that it was something that they saw us as, not so much advisors, but they saw us as somebody that was like, that they like confidants. Do you know what I mean? That they would come in. There is a story about Tori Spelling, but we'll leave that for another time.
Okay.
Yep.
No, I'm Pete. I haven't heard this story.
Yep.
Okay, and how did you carry that experience forward, to the rest of your career?
Well, interesting, because like you were saying, like that stigma, that was one of the things that was kind of holding me back from, it was something that was kind of making me think like, oh, should I take this job, even though that I know I can do this job inside and out? It would be so much fun, but like, what are people going to look at if I move on to another job? Like, are employers going to be open to this? And I actually ended up applying and working for a national jeweler, and they essentially, so I put it on there and I was like, okay, I'm just gonna like face this head on. And it turns out that in my final interview, so they moved me through and I was going to become a diamond consultant. And they're pushing me through the interview process. And in that last interview, the regional manager, I end up finding out that his wife actually sells to the parent company that I work for.
Oh.
And so they are like, she was a lingerie designer and all this other sort of stuff. So that was kind of interesting. So it kind of broke things down a little bit more. But he had a very legitimate question, and he asked me, how are you going to come in and start selling a high-priced, high-ticket luxury item coming from selling adult novelty? And I leaned across the table and I just said to him, if I can get people to open up about their deepest, darkest desires in less than 10 minutes, I can sell your damn diamonds. And he started laughing. And he's like, that is the best answer I've ever heard. And from there, I was hired. And within, I think, 6 weeks, I was the second like highest grossing salesperson on their team across Canada.
Excellent. Excellent. So
yes.
I just want to unpack that a little bit because that's so cool. Because I heard two kind of real gold nuggets in there. Yeah. One is this idea that I know I rant about often, which is the problem is the solution. And the other is vulnerability, in the sense that you were like, holy cow. And this is something I think that we can take from as business owners, not just in sales, but as people in every part of an organization is, oh my God, I have this thing that I fear. Is my experience here going to hold me back from this next job that I want? How am I going to kind of swing this? Should I even put it on there? Maybe you're thinking like, should I maybe just leave it off altogether and have to like kind of fudge over the gap or something? But in the end, you're like, you know what? I'm just going to face it head on and I'm going to make the problem the solution. That's not to say that just putting it on there made the problem the solution, but you actually harnessed that power and you were like, okay, this thing that I fear is actually going to close the deal because I'm going to put it forward as if I was able to do this and dig at it and look at, okay, why does this help me actually achieve the thing I want to do? And way more often than we think, that big, giant thing that we're afraid of, that we want to avoid, that we want to hide, that's a problem that we just don't want to solve, can actually be transformed into the vehicle for success. That is to say, not just solved, but transformed into the vehicle for success.
Yeah.
But the key to that and doing that successfully is not being afraid to be vulnerable. You know, number one, acknowledging that there's a problem or that there's something that you fear. There's vulnerability in that. You know, being able to say, this could potentially sink us. There's vulnerability in that. But turning around and being like, I'm going to lean into this problem and be real about it. You know, another example being if you're super nervous to get on a call and you're afraid of like, being, you know, like stuck in that nervousness, just being like, hey, I'm going to be honest. I feel super nervous to be on this call because I feel really excited to talk to you about this opportunity, right? Very different, but also very much the same, but it requires you to be vulnerable. And I think that is, you know, if I were to say my biggest critical factor that's contributed to my success in sales, it's my willingness to be vulnerable. So it was a little bit of a tangent, but.
No, you're completely right. You're completely right in that, so.
Awesome. So I want to shift, and I could just listen to you tell stories about your sales experience forever, or at least a whole hour. But I do want to shift our focus a little bit, maybe save another story or two for next time we have an interview together as well. So I'm curious, as someone who has been on you know, the hired end of being in sales and has been able to achieve success with companies ranging from fairly small to fairly huge. I'm curious, you know, a lot of our audience, as you know, are in the sales seat themselves and wanting to hire that out, but either feeling afraid to or feeling overwhelmed to or afraid to make themselves vulnerable in that way. So I'm curious, what is kind of the number one thing that someone who is hiring out sales, like what's the number one piece of insight or advice that you would give to them that maybe people aren't always aware of?
I think for me, like one of the key things that I really enjoyed coming into Anansi, and that I thought that was really, you know, like I haven't seen a lot, because I've been hired to be brought on to help develop their own sales process. But the fact that you guys already had one, and one that made sense to me, but that you guys were still open to be like, hey, tweak this where you see fit, or make this work where you think that it works. I think that was really imperative, is taking the time to write that out of what has worked for you personally, because, you know, I'm coming in and I'm going to be approaching the clients that you've worked with for 2-3 years, or you wanting to bring in new clients. So we want to replicate that, but taking the time to really clearly define what were your wins, what's worked for your sales process, and identify those and define them for when somebody comes in. I think that's really, really key. Because too many times I've gone into situations where I try to bring the process to them, only to come to find out that they're not jiving with that process. So it's much easier if you've already got it defined and I can come in and put my personal touch on it, for sure.
Okay. And of course, as you know, we are process fiends, but a lot of the people that we work with, maybe not as crazy obsessed with it. So I'm curious, like, how detailed does this need to be? We had a pretty detailed process for you to come into, but what's kind of like the minimum viable product that you need for it to be really helpful for you?
I would clearly define, okay, what does it look like to introduce somebody or to qualify them, like what we do, right? So really figuring out what is the qualification process that you want to bring a client through. So like these are the types of clients that we really want to work with, or giving the salesperson or the account manager the opportunity to be like, no thanks, I don't think this is going to work for us and it's going to fit.
Okay, qualification criteria, check.
Qualification criteria. And then it's going into, okay, now what does your presentation look like? Right? Like, so first,
so like a sales deck type thing?
Yeah, like having a sales deck is very, very important, so that they can, one, that the salesperson or the account manager can better understand of how they can sell, and clearly defining each of the stages and like how they're going to be able to sell that product. So it's the features, the advantages, the benefits of what your service or your product is going to be. So
all
that
that stuff that's in your head that you may not be in the new person's head, but that you kind of imagine is just automatically going to get into their head by osmosis.
Right, correct, exactly, that one right there. But it's also, you know, like I think if you've got an account manager and or a salesperson, they know how to dig in deep and ask those kinds of ask the questions. But even knowing the types of your ideal clients, right? So understanding what, like if you know, like when I wrote to you guys, one of the key things that you guys gave me was like, hey, we want you to sell to, how would you sell to a client? How would you find a client and sell to that client? But one of the things that I came back with is, well, what are some of your major pain points that your clients usually have? So if you, and Celine was right on it. She gave me those like 2 minutes later. And so it was much easier for me to, you know, look for somebody and to be able to sell to that. So identifying those pain points of your ideal client and having even that clear definition of who your ideal client is, that's going to be really helpful for an account manager to come in.
I love that. That's super clear and fairly basic, simple, but not always easy, right? You're needing the deck, qualification criteria, and understanding of what their key problems are, and understanding of what your key benefits are and how you solve that problem. It's almost like the information that we like put into copy and gather for copy, or for some reason. I don't know why. Oh, it's almost like it's all connected. Okay, are there any other like processes or systems that can be really helpful for an organization to have in place?
Yes, definitely. I think for me, one of the key changes for me in my career was being introduced to a CRM. So if you're an agency that doesn't have a CRM, but you are going to be approaching an account manager or salesperson that they have that experience, you definitely want to scoop that up. Having a client relationship management program is just going to make things so much easier. You can clearly see everything that is going on with all of your deals that are going on in the pipeline at that point in time, and that you're going to be like, what's viable, what isn't, what can you progress and move forward. It gives owners a sense of like, okay, yes, I understand where the business is, and they also see what the account manager is doing. But for account managers, like if they're not jazzed by keeping track of metrics and KPIs, might not be a person that you want to bring in. I'm a numbers girl. I want to see that I'm hitting the goal of how many meetings or how many conversations I'm having or connections that I'm making, because it's in those metrics that you can start to really fine tune your process and your sales process and your approach. And the more that you get in there to see like, okay, I know that if we speak to 10 people a week, of those 2 qualified leads are going to come from that. Like it just makes a no-brainer, invaluable. Yeah, very much so.
Yeah. That was information that took us a long time to kind of corral and understand, but it's just been valuable for us as an organization, as leaders overseeing you as well. And I will also say, just as a person hiring, that having screened at this point something like 200 different people with assessments, not just reading their resumes, finding someone who has strong, proven data abilities, as well as the very kind of like story-driven, conversational, gregarious, like personality type that usually is in sales, is very, very difficult, and make them prove it. Don't just take people's word for it. I know that we've had people who even could do kind of like simple napkin math or knew which metrics were important, but when it came to actually utilizing those metrics to improve and to track and etc., that's something that proven experience is very, very obvious if you ask for it. Anyone can kind of list what is needed, but very few people that we've seen can actually prove it to you. And it should be super obvious.
Yeah.
Yeah, just because they'll whip out stories with numbers, they'll they'll get real nerdy and real into it. And it's not the kind of thing you can easily fake if you've seen someone who knows the numbers. Until we'd come across an application where someone really knew it, we were really second guessing ourselves and thinking, okay, this person seems to know what they're doing. No, seems is not enough. Right. Just another little aside from the leader perspective. But I want to go back to something that you said and dig into it, because you said that a lot of the roles you've had were organizations that were kind of hoping for you to come in with a strong process and overhaul. And, you ran into some challenges, you said, around maybe they didn't have a written process, but they didn't like yours. Or I know I have at least one friend who has been told that, was told that there were no clear processes and she could just approach it however she wanted. But then as soon as she started doing that, she kept running into basically invisible processes where they were like, oh, this is how we do things. But she was like, but you just told me to do it with my approach. Anyway,
right.
So I'm curious, do you think it's more important for a company to have a super clear process they can kind of bring someone into and train, or an approach or methodology? Or do you think it's more important to hire someone who has that strength and basically step out of their way?
Well, in my experience, dealing with some of the smaller organizations or the entrepreneurs that I've run into in the past, they say that they're open to it and they want somebody to come in to take it over. So you're going to have to find somebody that's very strong to be like, no, like it's almost like they're qualifying at that point as well, right? So I think that it's, for me, and just even going through this process of, I would say if you've got something where it's written down at least at the very beginning, so that it's not just like, hey, blindly going in and saying, yes, just come in and show us your ways. You're just gonna run into all kinds of issues. At least just having it written down of like what your thoughts are and where you want it to be. And if you want to have a conversation, you would want to have like a couple of different meetings for that salesperson or that account manager to come in to clearly define it then, but at least have that outline and that openness to sit down rather than just be like, yeah, come in, do whatever you want and just get started right away. You're setting it up for failure right there.
Okay. So I'm hearing that you don't have to have everything kind of like planned out. And you don't have to have like a really strong sales methodology maybe that your company follows, but just having it in writing as a baseline, what you're doing now and what you're kind of hoping it could be, so that the person coming in can build off of that and have that understanding. Is that what I mean?
Yeah, definitely. Okay. And the openness to let go, because the one thing that I found with a lot of entrepreneurs is they were like, no, like these are the people that I've brought in, that I've worked with, that I've done all of this, so I know better. But you need to understand that there's going to be a little bit of let go so that you can have that person and that account manager come in, really own the role, and then run with it and take it to that next level. Because oftentimes when we do, like as entrepreneurs, and I've seen, sometimes they don't quite identify where there could be new opportunities, or there were opportunities that they knew, but that they just didn't act on, and they just, because they were wearing their, like too many different hats and doing too many other things.
Called out.
No, but the thing is like, I think what I found here is, and I think this is what's so great with the symbiotic, like relationship, and which is one of our core values, is the fact that, like, you even said it, like, I'm telling you things that you're already thinking about or have thought about, and that's why we're going to work so well together. Like, that's what I really like.
Yeah, that's true. That has been a strong measure of success as I learned to let go of the sales and marketing positions and fully let go, not just like kind of let go and then keep my fingers in all the pies all the time. That has been one of my biggest kind of like reinforcing markers of success, of being like, oh, I had this idea at the back of my mind. I was just waiting for the right time to bring it up so as not to like overwhelm you or whatever. And then you'll bring it up to me and be like, so we're at this point. I'm thinking this. by the way, I'm already kind of going and implementing it as long as it's okay with you. That's magic. And it's worth that awkward transition period of feeling like, you know, you're letting go of, it's almost like you're like breaking up with your clients and like they're starting this new relationship with someone else or something, you know? I mean, they're still having a relationship with your company, with your organization, but it can also, just being totally vulnerable, it can be a little bit lonely to let go of the sales position, because you go from having this like dopamine hits from like meeting all these different cool new people and making connections and seeing opportunities and creating wins, and that's really satisfying, to being like, oh, I want the time, I want more time, I want that extra growth, etc. But you know, there's this kind of in-between period where you're like, oh, I haven't quite settled into my new role yet, but I'm missing being that person, making the fire happen, you know, like making the food, like getting all that stuff going. So, but it's important. It's still important, because as they say, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go with a team.
Yeah.
And that's been my experience. Yeah.
And, you know, one of the key things that I find is we have a set weekly meeting. That is so important and key with making sure that everybody's on track. We have a scorecard, everybody understands it. We have a way that we do our meetings. Like I'm a process person, so that's why I'm like so in heart. And it just makes me, like it energizes me, right? And when sometimes like things aren't matching up on the process, it kind of frustrates me sometimes. But going back to make sure when you're meeting with somebody, you're setting that meeting with your account manager or your salesperson. If it's not on a weekly basis, at least on a bi-weekly basis. That touch point is key for them. As salespeople, we love talking and interacting, and we also love the positive reinforcement. But you also want to have somebody that's open to the constructive criticism as well. And somebody that's one of the key things that I found with a lot of the people who were successful and that came to work with me as account managers. I really enjoyed those individuals they were open. They knew that they didn't know everything, but that we could work together to like overcome a challenge or identify a new opportunity. You want somebody that's going to be aware like that. So.
Yeah. So a balance of open to criticism, open to shifting and growing and changing, and willing to meet with you regularly enough to, you didn't quite say this, but this is the subtext for me, for catching problems, brainstorming things, and really just maintaining that connection before something turns into a big problem.
100%.
Because mistakes happen to all of us, and our capacity to catch mistakes and problems and fix them while they're still small is just, I said it before, I'll say it again, one of the pillars that our success is built on. Anyway, this time has just passed so.
Oh,
yeah, so many things I want to keep asking you, but we'll leave that. We'll leave people a little bit hungry for more, and I'll be excited to pepper you with more questions another time soon. In the meantime, you know, what is it that gets you up in the morning other than coffee?
Oh, it was the coffee. But let me tell you why. It's not just the coffee. It's the, there's a whole there's like a routine and there's like a comfort in that, right? So it's not just my cinnamon honey lattes that just get me energized, that I'm like, oh my God, I'm so looking forward to that. But honestly, it's even going over, and before the pandemic, is like going to see my barista, and like they know exactly how I want it. And just even connecting with that person first thing in the morning, do you know what I mean? And just taking that first sip, but it's all of that comfort, that kind of like
ritual too.
It's a ritual, and that you're just kind of like taking the time because you're thinking about your day, and you're starting to think about like, okay, I'm, you know, and you have that first sip, and then it's just like, okay, I'm on fire now. Like I know what's going to happen. I'm going to hit this, and this target today and this goal. But it's more the ritual, you know, like even during the pandemic, like I live in rainy Vancouver, BC, and like you're making that coffee and it's the sound of rain outside. It's just all of that just makes you feel, you know, you're like, you wake up and you're like, oh, I just love that feeling. So
yeah, that's awesome. That's a great answer. Okay, that answer's accepted.
great. And side note, so like I've got a very particular way that I like my lattes, but the barista, so, and this is talking about like connecting with people authentically, is I have this one coffee shop that I go to all the time. It's amazing. But I had a boyfriend go one morning to pick up our lattes, and he walked in and he was like, what the honey and cinnamon? And they're like, oh, that's Tania's drink. Yeah, for sure. We'll just grab that for you. So it's just connecting, because then you know now you're going to have like that perfect cup of latte.
Yeah, that's so funny that you mentioned that, because when I lived in Vancouver, I worked as a barista, and I lived in Marpole, which was kind of like, we used to call it, it's like a small community in a big city. It's changed now. This is many years ago. And I was on the opposite side of that. Like I got to be the barista that knew everyone's name and all the people in the community. And we had a book of their drinks even, so we could train new people on them. And it really was, and it was a secondhand bookstore as well. So for me and my ADHD brain, it was nice to bounce over from the book side, because books are my passion, and to the coffee, and kind of have that fire. So it's really cool, because I actually I don't know how many of our people listening know this, but I don't come from a corporate background. I basically worked in like coffee shops and grocery stores mostly until I started Anansi. And while I have had I've been doing the copywriting and been doing the communications work, I have also been having these experiences of just basic human connection at the same time.
Right.
So that's really cool to hear about it from the other side.
Because oftentimes you guys are the first people that we see in the morning. Do you know what I mean? Like if I live on my own and I see like this happy barista behind there, like you're the first person I'm saying good morning to most times than not.
Yeah.
And sometimes people don't realize that. Like, I'm sorry, but you guys are essential.
Totally. And this has been a big thing, not to send us on too far of a tangent, but, as someone who still, like, I have friends and connections in all walks of life. I live in a small community where a lot of people I know, those are the jobs that are really available, are service jobs. And like my best friend, who actually, she works in insurance now, but it was interesting because that is basically a similar customer service thing, but it doesn't have the kind of daily coffee aspect of it. And people who work in service are often some of the most hard-working people that I freaking know, busting their asses. And also they drive a lot of the connection and communication and human interaction and just, connection that we get in our day-to-day lives. And usually they thrive on it. Like my best friend, my partner formerly worked as a barista as well. Like the thing that drives them from these positions is not typically the work itself. Usually they love the work itself. They love the people, most of the people, customer service.
Right.
It's actually management, lack of processes, high expectations, and low wages that cause them to move on. And I know many people who, into their 30s, even I have one friend who's into his 50s who would love to just continue working these service positions because of that connection. If they were able to make a living on it and get respect from their bosses primarily. Anyway, this is what drove me to want to create such a strong team. Okay, so what is the number one thing that you do to preserve your wellness?
No, for me, it is, it's having a workout routine. It really is. I've been really kind of on this path for the past year and a half, 2 years. And it's not about the losing weight or anything else like that. This is an hour and a half of my time where I just get to be no phone. I put it away. It's not allowed. And I just get to, like, I oftentimes, like when I'm at Orange Theory and I'm walking out all of those issues. And again, I'm being driven. Like I just, that right there, like that little pump of adrenaline and being challenged in an hour and a half and challenging myself. I love it.
Awesome. Yeah. I'm struggling with the habit a little bit, but I so vibe with you. I've started taking an hour a lot of days to just go through a routine, and it feels so good.
Yes.
What is, no, I was going to ask the same question over again. Do you have any last words of wisdom that you want someone listening to this today to walk away with?
a big thing for me, especially being an account manager, is when you're getting those cold calls, you be open. You never know when an opportunity is going to present itself and that somebody's going to be able to help you out. Oftentimes, you know, it's somebody that's just getting started and they're just trying to like work their way through of like how to initiate a cold call or a cold message or something along those lines. Like the more that you have an openness to be like, okay, I'm gonna give you a minute and a half. Give me your pitch. Let me hear what it might be. I just feel like in those moments and in those times, and this is even interactions with everybody on an everyday basis, just open yourself up. You never know where that opportunity, like something's going to present itself. Because that was one of those situations for me where all of a sudden I'm living down in Miami and then I'm there for 6 months and I'm on the back of a yacht selling yachts to somebody. Like, you just never know.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. That's really incredible. As always, you know, actually, before I get to that, just thank you. Thank you so much. This was just great. It was fun. It had lots of gold nuggets and really like practical, actionable insight, which of course I'm addicted to. And it's always just honestly a pleasure to get to chat with you. This for me is one of those situations where I just get to hang out with someone cool for an hour and call it work. So yeah, thanks again, Tania. And to everyone listening to this today, hopefully you got a little bit of a laugh with today's episode, just a little bit of a warm moment. Hopefully it even encouraged you to maybe be a little bit more vulnerable in the next opportunity that comes your way. Mm-hmm. But regardless of whether this episode really didn't do anything for you, in which case, why are you still listening? I call you on that, but just kidding. I hope that you're able to just take a few moments, do something active, take a moment with yourself, just find a moment of joy in your day to day. Have a good one, guys.